Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar on giving your payroll a spring clean. My name's Duncan. I am one of your presenters today, and I am joined by my colleague Calvin, who will be taking over to deliver the second half of this short session. Let's take a look at what we're going to cover in the webinar today. So I'm going to be starting things off with some tips on employee management, specifically around the employee list, explaining how to use the criteria settings to show or hide employees, and also looking at how to set up and manage employee groups. We're then going to cover directors, looking at the different director methods and how to set these up within the employee record. Some of these changes can only be made at the start of a tax year, which is why we mention it as part of this Spring Clean webinar. I'm then going to hand over to Calvin, who's going to be looking at tidying up pay elements. So he's going to explain how to remove pay elements and delete those that are no longer needed. And he'll then move on to some data management tips, including using the optimise option to keep your data in top condition, and also getting into a good backup routine, making sure that your backups are safe and secure. So all of that should take approximately half an hour, and we have the remaining time in the webinar to run through some further support and to continue answering any questions that you submit via the Q&A section. So let's move straight on to the first section of the webinar, where I'm going to run through some employee management tips. And this is all around tidying up your employee list and controlling what's visible within that list in terms of leavers, employees on hold, and different groups of employees. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is the criteria settings. So this is a way that you can control which employees are visible within your employee list, opting to show or hide leavers, employees on hold or those on holiday, but also creating filters where you can easily select specific pay frequencies, employees within a department or cost center, or employees paid by a specific payment method. Now, those criteria settings then filter through to the outline section, which you may have noticed to the left of your employee list. And we're going to take a look at how that will change the way that the outline feature looks and works, so you can basically tailor it to your own specific needs. So we'll come into our first demo if I bring the slides down. And I've got a mixture of pay frequencies, got a few departments set up just to sort of illustrate the criteria settings. And you'll find the criteria settings just from this icon above the employee list. And if I click onto this, these are the default settings. So we've got the filters, which I'll come back to in a moment, but we will start with the exclude employees option. So there are 4 statuses that you can exclude from the list or hide from the list, which is employees marked on hold, employees on holiday, where they've been paid using advance pay, current year leavers, so employees with a leave date in the current tax year, and historical leavers, that's employees with a leave date in a previous tax year. And by default, you will have historical leavers excluded. Now, you can bring these back if you ever need to look at an employee record for someone that left in a previous tax year. So maybe they only left last month. You can always deselect that box and click OK. And what you can now see in my employee list is I have 2 leavers, one that left back in 2022, and I have a leaver who left in the current tax year, actually right at the start of the tax year on the 7th of April. Now, many people like to tidy up the employee list so that it only shows current employees. And if we go back into the criteria settings, we can opt to hide both the historical and the current year leavers. And if I click OK, you can see straight away the effect of that is to remove the leavers from the list. Now, I do also have an employee marked on hold. They're a seasonal worker, so they only work for me at peak times. And if I wanted to remove them from the list as well, it's the exact same principle. I could go in and tick the on hold button. And as you can see there, I've now got a nice clean list with only employees that are currently working for me. Now, I'm just going to set this criteria back to how it was, because I do like to see current leavers and employees on hold within the list. And I now want to draw your attention to this section here on the left-hand side, to the left of the employee list. So this is the outline pane, and you can show or hide it by clicking outline here at the top. As you can see, it disappears and then comes back. And then there is a structure underneath the All Employees folder, which is controlled by the filters set up in your criteria settings. So the default filter is just to filter by pay frequency first. So in my example, I can go to monthly if I only want to see monthly paid employees in the list, or I can choose to see my weekly paid employees. And for each of those pay frequencies, I have a second filter level where I can view employees for a specific department. So sales department, services, admin, and directors in this case. So whether or not you use this will be down to personal preference and whether or not you like to process in batches, or maybe you just process all of your employees at the same time. But you can customize how these filters work just by jumping back into criteria and then changing the 3 levels of filter. So if I do want to deal with one department at a time first, I could set that as the first filter and then maybe filter by payment period. You can see how that's changed the options here on the left-hand side. I am going to put it back to what it was. So pay period and department. And if there are pay frequencies that you don't use at all, so for me it's fortnightly and 4 weekly, we could also take them out of the structure. So if I make these changes and click OK, you can see now that I've just got the choice between monthly and weekly. And then if I wanted to, I can then drill down to the department. So criteria settings control the outline pane. We can toggle that on and off. And it also allows you to hide employees with that lever on hold or on holiday status. So that's just a little bit on criteria, but sticking with the employee management theme, I also want to briefly mention employee groups. So we've already seen departments and cost centers, which can be set up within your company settings and assigned to a specific employee. But employee groups work slightly differently. Now, they can be used to process or report on different sets of employees. But one of the key differences here is it is possible to assign employees to multiple groups, which of course is not possible when it comes to departments and cost centers. So some examples of how you might use employee groups. You might have full-time and part-time employees that you want to very quickly select in the outline window. Or you might have groups of employees that perform a particular role. So an example might be you have first aiders that might receive a first aid allowance. Could be employees within a savings scheme or a cycle to work scheme. And it just gives you a way of creating these own bespoke sets of employees or groups of employees, which you can then easily select to run reports or even to process payroll. So I've put a link to more information on employee groups on the slide, but let's give you another quick demo on this one. So a couple of places you can set up the groups initially. You can go to the desktop tasks, where you'll find the option for new employee group, or if you've already set them up, you can edit or delete them. Or if you open the outline structure, you can right click anywhere within here, and then you have the same options, new employee group, edit and delete. So let's go with the examples I've mentioned. We're going to create a full-time group, grouping together all of my full-time employees. And you'll see when you set it up, it is specific to your username, but you can make the group available to all users. So if you have different people logging into your payroll, they can set up their own groups, or you might set up some groups that you want everyone to be able to see. So I'm going to create that full-time group, and you will see that it now appears under the employee group section, but at the moment, there are no employees assigned to it. Now, it is pretty simple to assign the employees. You don't even have to access the employee record. You would simply select them in the list. So I'm just picking out my full-time employees. Let's say it's these ones here. And then once you've made a selection, you would right-click and you would assign them to a group. So it's just the one setup. I would then click on to save. And if I now highlight my full-time group, you will see those specific employees in view. So let's create another one, part-time. So for this one, I'm going to swap my selection. by clicking swap, and then I will assign them to the part-time group. And just to illustrate that you can have people in more than one group, if we set up my first aiders, and I'll just pick some random employees. I've got 3 first aiders on my staff. I'm going to assign them to the first aiders group. And now we can see that employee 1 is in both the first aiders and the full-time employee group. And once you've got access to all of these employees together, you can then run any relevant reports. If you're processing a specific payment for that group of employee, you could assign the payment with global changes. You could jump into the enter payment screen. So you could use that for any kind of practical use that you can think of. And then if you ever want to return back to all employees, it's just a case of selecting the all employees option within the outline window. So that's just a very quick look at employee groups and some tips there on tidying your employee list using both criteria and groups. So moving on to our next topic, we're going to give you a quick few minutes on directors. So when it comes to company directors, there are special national insurance rules that apply. And the way that national insurance is calculated for a director throughout the year will depend on the director status that you've assigned to them. So first of all, let's look at the 2 director statuses. So there's the annual basis and the pro rata basis. Now with an annual basis director, it means that their national insurance is calculated based on their cumulative earnings throughout the year and the annual national insurance thresholds. So with this method, they would not pay any national insurance until their cumulative earnings were above the annual primary threshold, which for the new tax year is £12,570. And then on earnings above that, they would pay 12% if they're on category A for their main rate until their cumulative earnings went above the upper earnings limit for the year. Now, pro rata basis works differently because you calculate the national insurance in the same way as a non-director throughout the year. So it's worked out each period using that period's earnings and the weekly or monthly thresholds, depending on the pay frequency, but it will be recalculated in the final period of a tax year or a period that the director leaves on the annual basis. So essentially, regardless of the method, come the end of the year, the director will pay the same national insurance. But with pro rata basis, if they are earning around the same pay each period, it gives them the opportunity to spread the cost of their national insurance more evenly. Whereas with annual basis, if the employee's pay varies, it means that there won't be any nasty surprises at the end of the year when a recalculation is done to work out the national insurance due. Now, there's no right or wrong answer as to which director status you should use. It's totally your choice, maybe in conjunction with the director deciding how you're going to do it. But when it comes to changing this status, there are certain changes that can only be made at the start of a tax year. So you can change from director to non-director at the start of a tax year. So if someone ceases to be a director midway through a year, they continue on the director method until the end of that tax year and they can switch to non-director in the new year. But if someone was on annual method and you wanted to move them onto pro rata instead, that again can only be done at the start of the tax year. So we'll take a very quick look at some director records and we'll see how the national insurance is calculated at the start of the year as we move into a new year. And then we'll be ready to move on and get Calvin to start looking at deleting pay elements. So I'll just bring the slides down. And I'm actually going to return to my payroll tasks. So I have a couple of directors set up on my payroll, one of them on the pro rata method and the other one on the annual method. If I just open up one of the records and click on the employment tab, this is where you will find the director status. And at the start of a year, you can make any changes necessary. So switching to pro rata basis, they were previously on annual, or switching to non-director if they have now ceased to be a director. So as you can see, I can happily change the status at this point, but if there was any history for the year, and there isn't so far, you'll see an error message telling you that the national insurance rules prevent this change from being made. The other one, as I say, is set up on pro rata basis. And it is always worth checking if you've just changed a director status that you've got the correct director start date recorded, because that will affect the national insurance calculation. And you can find that if you go into the year-to-date values and click on the director's NIC tab. So you can see this employee's been a director since the start of the 2020 to 21 tax year. Now, both of these directors earn the same amount. They both get a basic salary of £2,500. And if I just set my first pay date of the year, which is going to be the 30th of April for these two directors, and have a look in the enter payment screen, you'll start to see the difference in the national insurance. So gross pay, £2,500. And for the director on pro rata method, you can see national insurance has been calculated for the employee. It's also been calculated for the employer. And that is based on their monthly earnings and the monthly bands and rates. But if we contrast that with the other director, the one on the annual basis, you'll see for this one, there is no national insurance calculated at this point. And the reason is their cumulative earnings are less than the annual primary threshold. So it's going to take them, given that the threshold is 12,570, it's going to take them a little while, maybe 6 months, before they start to pay national insurance in this particular scenario. But once their cumulative earnings exceed that primary threshold, it will be 12% of their earnings taken as national insurance. So they wouldn't be getting the monthly kind of lower earnings, the monthly primary threshold kicking in because they're on the annual basis. So as I say, they will end up paying the same national insurance at the end of the year. It's just in this case, all things being equal, the first director would spread the cost of that national insurance evenly throughout the year, whereas with the annual director, they'll start to pay it when it becomes due, but they'll be paying more at that time. So that was just a little bit on directors, and I have put a link to our support guide if you want to read more on those different director methods. So it is now time to move on to our next topic and to bring Calvin on. So Calvin's going to take us through removing pay elements. So back to you, Calvin.
Thank you so much, Duncan. Okay, so let's have a look at removing some pay elements. So this is where you may have some pay elements that you haven't used in a while, which is basically just clogging up the data and causing the data set to be a little larger than it could be. So you might want to delete those, and similar with changing directors, as Duncan mentioned there, the best time to do that is at the beginning of the tax year when there are no year-to-date values. So what we'll be doing, we'll be demoing the full process. However, there are a couple of steps to complete before you're able to delete a pay element. And the first one is going back to that criteria that Duncan showed earlier, is just to ensure that all your employees are showing, including your current year as well as historical leavers. And you would use the criteria options to show those. The reason for that is you will need to then, as the next step says, remove the pay element from your employees, and you can do this in mass using global changes. Now you can do it individually as well, but if you're looking to delete the pay element, then you will need to remove it from every single employee who that has been assigned to. And that does include historical leavers, which is why we say make sure they show, so you can include them in the selection when you come to do the changes. Finally, once you've done those two things, you'll be able to then delete that pay element completely. So what we'll do now is let's jump into the program. We'll show you that process as well as a few issues. So we set the data up so that it will have a couple of problems, and I'll show you how you would go around that and what you can do. So here we are in our Sage 50 payroll program now. First thing, I'm just going to show you my pay elements. So if I click on company in the bottom left, then pay elements, you'll see there we have a list of 11 pay elements. Now, some of these have not been used for a while, and I wish to delete those so that I can minimize the number that we have, which again, of course, reduces the data set size and it makes it run just a little bit smoother, especially when it comes to taking backups, which of course is a sneak peek into the next section. So those are our pay elements. So if I click close now, you can see there we have our employees listed. Now, just as a quick note, if you want to remove the pay element from a single employee, go into their employee record like we just have now, click on the employment tab, click pay elements, and you'll see there we have those pay elements that are assigned to our employee. So we're going to be deleting this one here, which is mid-year bonus. Now, to delete it from the employee record, you would just need to simply select the F8 key on your keyboard. And then you'll get that message to say delete selected item, click yes, and it's gone. So that's how you would remove that pay element from an employee record individually. So that's just for this one employee. Hit the save button and then save again, and then you can close the employee record. That pay element has now been removed from that single employee. However, I'll not be able to delete it because it's not going to be used in future because it's still assigned to other employees. So we'll go ahead again, click clear and swap. We're going to highlight everybody this time. We're going to click tasks at the very top. We're going to go down to global changes, then across once more, down to payments, and you'll see we have remove payment. So if we select that option, we give us our list of pay elements along with the references. If we scroll down. Now at this point, this is the first curveball that I've added in. You'll see there we have two pay elements by the same name. We have mid-year bonus, which is reference 7, and we have mid-year bonus, which is referenced 11. So as you can see there, we don't know which one to remove. Now we don't want to delete both of these, we just want to delete one. So there's an easy way to find out which one is which. So we'll cancel out of this now because there's a report you can run. The report is the employee details payments report. I'll show you where that is now. So we've got our employees highlighted. Click on reports at the very top. Then click employee. Now, bear in mind these are all in alphabetical order, so it makes it nice and easy to find. So we're going to scroll down and find employee details payments, which is right there. Click the preview report. And there you can see a list of all of the pay elements along with their default rates that are assigned to each individual employee along with the reference number. So we didn't want to delete reference 11 because it's not assigned to anyone. That is our new one. But you can see reference number 7, which is the mid-year bonus. This is the one we wish to delete. So you can see which pay elements are assigned to which employees using this particular report along with their reference numbers, which will allow you to then understand which ones you want to delete and which ones are still assigned to employees that you need to go ahead and, of course, remove as well. So we'll close that report now. So we now know which one to remove. So we'll go back to our global changes, tasks, global changes, payments, remove payment, and we know it's number 7. So highlight that one. You can, of course, do multiple if you wish to, just by highlighting the ones you want to do. Then click OK. Then click yes. You'll see a total of 8 records for the selected employees were successfully updated. Now you're probably wondering why it's 8, not 9, because I've got 9 employees showing. And the reason is we deleted one from the employee record manually just before. So that's why it's 8, if anyone is wondering. So we'll click OK, and that's it. So we've now removed our pay element from our employees that are showing on our list at the minute. So let's go and try and delete that pay element now. So company in the bottom left, then pay elements. We know it's reference 7. So let's go and delete that particular pay element and then click yes. Now this was the second curveball that we've built in. So you'll see there we've still got a message to say that the selected element could not be deleted because this payment type is allocated to an employee. However, we went through and removed that payment via global changes for everyone that's on our employee list. So I'm going to click OK to this and I will show you why. If you remember back to the steps, we need to ensure that all of our employees are showing on our employee list. So if I go into criteria, you'll see at the moment, from what Duncan was showing you earlier, we're excluding historical leavers. So that's anyone who has left in a previous tax year. So if I untick that and click OK, another employee has appeared. So we were missing an employee because we hadn't set that criteria to show every single employee that we've had. So we haven't actually removed that payment from all of our employees. It was still sticking with one single employee. So we can now go ahead and highlight this employee. Now again, because it's just one, we can either go into the employee record and delete that manually, or we can do it via global changes as well. So again, global changes, I'll show you this way because it's a good one to remember whether it is. Then payments, and then remove payment. Select the payment you wish to remove, click OK. See, we've only had one employee selected. We'll proceed, and that one employee has now been updated. So we'll click OK. And now, when we click company and then pay elements, we have our pay element here. So we're going to try and delete it once more. Click delete, click yes. You can see now it has deleted and it has been removed from our list. So there you can see that that is the way to delete and remove pay elements from employees. Now you can still remove pay elements from employees without having to delete them. It was just a process for if you wish to clean up your number of pay elements, because we do advise trying to keep them as minimal as possible because it keeps that data nice and small, which then obviously allows it to run a bit quicker and a bit smoother. If, of course, you are just removing them from the employee records, you can do that in exactly the same manner. And you can even add payments using global changes as well. But bear in mind, the order of which you add your payments to the employee records is the order that they appear in Enter Payments. So we'll close out of there now, because that is removing pay elements. So the process is fairly straightforward, especially if you need to delete them. It's just making sure, and that top step is the most important one, making sure that you are highlighting all of your employees and making sure you have both historical and current year leavers showing on your employee list so that you can include those employees as well. So the next thing we're going to cover is data management. So this is all about managing your data, keeping it nice and tidy and nice and secure. Now the first thing is optimizing your data. So you can see that optimizing your data is an option when you log in to your company. So you can see that on the screenshot, that is the login company screen. I will show you it as a demo as well. But what optimizing does, the best way I like to describe it is if you imagine your data is like a drawer full of wires. Everything's there, all of the wires work. But if you're looking for a specific wire and they're all tangled up, it takes a little bit of time to try and find that wire. Also, as wires get tangled, it increases the chances of anything going wrong with them. So what optimizing does is it essentially tidies up those wires, makes them all nice, neat in a line, untangles them all, which then if it means you need to go and get a specific one, nice and quick and easy, you find exactly the one you need. So that's the best way I can kind of describe what it does without getting into all the technical language. But it, in essence, tidies up your data, removes any minor corruptions, and of course makes payroll run a little quicker and a little smoother. It also prevents errors during installation processes as well. Now, I'll show you again. I'll jump into the program and we'll jump into it and I'll show you where the optimize option is. So again, we're back in our payroll program. Now the optimize is something you wouldn't see normally when you're already in the program. As I am though, to save me having to close down, if I just go to File, then Open Company, there it is. This is the window that you will normally see when you first open your Sage 50 payroll. So I'll highlight this company, our demonstration company, and then you'll see there's an optimize button. All you need to do is click the optimize. You get a message to say, please wait while optimizes your data. And before I can even finish that sentence, you'll see that it's done. So it isn't a very long process, it's very quick, and it's something we advise you do on a regular basis. So don't worry if you forgot once, you can do it again the next time you log in. But again, it's something that we advise you do it every time you log into your payroll, because it doesn't take too long to do. It's just a quick click of a button, wait till it's finished, and then you can click OK and log in then as normal. So that is the optimizing. So that's keeping your data tidy. The next one is about security and keeping your data secure, and of course ensuring you always have a backup plan, which is of course taking backups. So again, with backups, similar to optimizing, we do advise you take backups regularly throughout your payroll processing, and that includes before you update records and after you've updated records, so at least twice during your payroll process. However, there is no limit to how many backups you can take, and the more is always better than less. So hopefully it is a process you're very familiar with. And one other thing to note is when it comes to backups, always store them, if you can, of course, on either a removable hard drive, so like a USB stick, or in a cloud-based storage system. You need to be able to access those backups if you can't access your computer. The reason for that is there is nothing worse than if your data, your laptop, your program is also installed on one laptop, for example, and then you come to work one day and you can't get on that laptop. Something's gone drastically wrong. It might have been a leak that's landed on the laptop, so now it won't turn on, which means your data is gone, your backups are gone, and your program's gone. However, if that were to occur and you've got your backups on either a USB stick or a cloud-based storage system, you can then jump on a different laptop or a different computer, reinstall Sage 50 Payroll, and then restore your data back from that backup, and you're back to where you left it. So there's no worries, you don't have to rebuild your data. All you have to do is continue where you'd left. So it's the equivalent of saving your work, is probably the best way to put it. And it's also very good when it comes to trying to troubleshoot problems. So we do advise backing up very regularly. Now, I am going to show you in the program where you can back up, but remember, it usually prompts you at the point that we recommend. So that is during the update records process, and of course, during the pension assessment is another one. If you've got the pension module, that is. What I would say is going back to deleting your pay elements, do take a backup before you do that process, just in case anything goes wrong. You accidentally remove and delete the wrong one, for example. As long as you've got a backup, you can just restore that back in and start again if you need to. So there's a key example of how backups can really help and gives you that bit of safety net. So to take a backup manually, you can go to File, Backup, and here is the backup wizard. Click Next. The files that we recommend that you back up are highlighted by default, so just click Next. Here is where you'll be browsing to where you want to save your backups. So for example, as I mentioned, try and put them on a USB stick or a cloud-based storage system. So browse to that, then give the backup a name and hit the Save button. Then click Next and Finish. That will scroll through and you'll see your backup has been successful. Click OK, and that's it. So that's all there is to it in terms of taking a backup. So again, it's a very, very quick process. And of course, it's one of those that you need to kind of do on a regular basis just to make sure your data is secured. So that is backing up, and that is also the end of the session. I'm aware we've overrun slightly. I know we've got that 45-minute scheduled time, but the session was due to run for half an hour, but we've run over a little bit. So I just want to run through some further support with you first of all. And the first one is our help center. So this is sage.co.uk/help, where you can search for our knowledge base if you'd like to learn more about optimizing or of course removing pay elements. You can pop that in the search bar and have a look through all of our support guides on those subjects. The next one is the webinars, so that we do weekly webinars. So we've got a couple coming up next week, and they are every Wednesday and Thursday as well. So if you'd like to find out what's coming up for our webinars, head on over to our Help Centre, click that webinars tab in the very top right, and you'll be able to see the schedule of webinars coming up. There are also videos to be watching as well if you wish to watch a few videos. And if you need to speak to us, you can find the Get in Touch options here as well. And last, but certainly not least, quite possibly my favorite, Sage University. So Sage University is where you can go for free learning. So you get e-learning, bite-sized learning, as well as product certification as well. As I mentioned, it is free of charge, and it can be done in your own time at your own pace as well. And it's a really valuable tool. I wouldn't recommend this more to anyone because it is amazing. It's got some learning courses that even we do ourselves. So if you'd like the same training as us, head on over to Sage University. And that's it. So we're going to stick around for the remaining time just to finish off any remaining questions that you might have. And then we'll be back a little bit later to say our final goodbyes. However, if you are leaving us at this point in time, it's been an absolute pleasure to see so many of you on the session today. So thank you so much. And if you will be directed to a short feedback survey when you do leave the session. And it does mean quite a lot to both myself and Duncan if you spend that small amount of time just filling that in. It does mean a lot, and we can't improve the sessions without that feedback. So we do read it fairly religiously and try and implement as much as we possibly can based on what you're telling us, whether that be keep doing what we're doing because you love it so much, or whether you want to see some slight changes. We certainly can't do it without that feedback. So thank you in advance for that. So I'm going to pop on mute now, and then I'll be back to say our final goodbyes once we come to the end of the session, or of course, all of the questions are answered. Thank you. Okay, everyone, thank you again so much. We have come to the end of the session, so we stick around just a little longer there, a minute overdue. But thank you again for everyone who has stuck around to the end of the session. I certainly hope you've enjoyed it and hopefully took something away from the session today. Once again, I hope you have a look at some of the webinars coming up in the future. We've got some great sessions planned, especially for pensions, particularly this month. So Get to Know Pensions is happening next week. If you'd like to join us, don't forget to head on over to the Help Centre, hit that webinars button and have a look at what's coming up. And we do update that regularly as well. So do keep an eye on it, or even bookmark the page if you wish to. So the last thing from me is just to say thank you once more. I hope you're all looking after yourselves out there, staying safe, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.